yogiramsuratkumar jayagurudaya. Inquest of Godல படிச்சுட்டு இருக்காங்க. அதில் பப்பா இங்கே பப்பா சுவாமி ராமதாஸ் ஆங்கிலத்தில் வந்து அதை இது படிப்பாங்க.
John C. Making enquiries, they straightway went to Dharmashala and resting here for some time, at the suggestion of the Sadhuram, directed their steps to the bazaar and obtaining some flour, etc. From a charitable merchant, the Sadhuram prepared a few rotis and dal curry. After finishing dinner, they remained in the Dharmashala till evening. Then the Sadhuram proposed a move towards the station, which was reached before dark. The same ticket clerk whom Ram had brought in touch with the previous night was found at the gate. Ramadass went to him and requested him to allow them to proceed to Bombay by the night train, although at first he consented to do so. When the train arrived at 2 a.m., he refused them admission to the platform. It was all Ram's wish, so they had to spend another night in the station, which meant cold, stiffening and swelling of the limbs for a second time. Next morning, they retraced their steps again to the city. The state of the Sadhuram's mind at this time was most miserable. Coming to the same Dharmashala, they met two Telugu sadhus. The Sadhuram, after a short talk with these sadhus, at once made up his mind to give up the company of Ramadass and join them. It was again all Ram's making. His ways are always inscrutable. Total submission to him means to anxiety, no fear, no pain, and all assurance. About half an hour later, Ramadass was left alone in the company of Ram, whose name he was uttering without cessation. The new sadhus and the Sadhuram, who was so long his guide and foster mother, as it were, departed from the Dharmashala. Ramadass was meditating on Ram unconcerned at the severance of the Sadhuram's company. For complete resignation to will of Ram, God deprived him of all sense of anxiety and cares for the future. Thus, time was passing in Rambajan when two friends coming up to him dropped into his hands 2 pieces, suggesting that he might purchase some eatables from the bazaar and break his fast. Accordingly, he directed his steps to the bazaar. Here, while purchasing some eatables from a sweetmeat shop, he felt at his elbow somebody pulling him. He had now received the eatables. Turning round, he heard the friend address him, Maharaj, a Sikh decides you to go over to him. Ramadass instantly followed the friend who led him into a shop, wherein were filled up wheat bags. As he entered the place, a friend came up from inside the shop and fell prostrate at the feet of Ramadass. The mendicant, rising up with folded hands, the friend requested him to accept Bhiksha at his house that day. This friend was the merchant who had sent for him. He was then asked to sit on a thick white mattress called gadi with cushions to lean against. But Ramadass was a humble slave of Ram, so he preferred to sit on the floor. Here again he was offered a gunny bug on which he sat. After dinner, the kind-hearted merchant sat beside him and put him some questions in regard to his movements, etc., which were all duly answered in terms of Ram's will, which was alone his sole guide. He further told the sake of Ram's kindness and love for his bhaktas, and how he who trust Ram knows no sorrow and can be happy under all circumstances. To have Ram's name on the lips means joy, pure joy, nothing but joy. The merchant was visibly affected to hear these words, for he was himself a great Rama Bhakta. Sitaram, Sitaram was always on his tongue. After a few minutes' talk, the Sikh entreated Ramadass to remain with him for some days. He said that Ramadass' body, which was then in a most neglected condition, required to be taken care of, and that Ram had specially sent Ramadass to him with his sole object. It must be related here that the clothes in which he was clad were all rags. Magadev Prasad, such was the name of the merchant in whose care he was placed by Ram, provided him with new clothes dyed in Geruya, and every care was taken of him by this kind host. Magadev became extremely fond of him. At nights, in spite of remonstrances, Magadev Prasad would sit beside the sleeping Ramdas and press his feet. Oh, the kindness he showered on poor and humble Ramdas was unbounded. O Ram, it was thee who was doing it all through that friend. O Ram, how good, how living thou art. Weep on Ramdas. In silence, weep not in sorrow but in joy. Because Ram's grace is upon you. For a month, he was detained by Mahadev with him. Throughout the day and night, he would not give up the company of Ramdas. At his request, Ramdas was explaining to him the meaning of some slokas from the Bhagavad Gita, with the help of the small understanding with which he was gifted by Ram. And Mahadev in return would read out and explain that monumental work of Tulsidas, the Hindi Ramayana. All people in his house were also very hospitable and kind to Ramdas. To prevent any cold affecting the heart of frail-bodied Ramdas, Mahadev got a tight woolen jacket made for him. O Ram, how kind of thee, when thou art out to show thy fondness and love for thy slave. Though Shamar, the very human mother who gave birth to Ramdas' body, such is thy unlimited love. During Ramdas' stay at Jhansi, Mahadev Prasad took him on a visit to two Mohammedan saints. The first was an aged saint named Mirzaji. He might have been over 60 years of age, lean and bent. He would not speak, but there was a cheerful twinkle in his eyes. In short, he was a mere baby, simple, innocent, and free. Mahadev Prasad had brought some eatables with him, which he thrust into the saint's mouth bit by bit. There was not a single tooth in the saint's mouth. The eatables were soft sweets. He chewed and swallowed them unconcernedly. He seemed to recognize nobody. His eyes had an absent and vacant look, though bright. He was visited twice. On the second occasion, he was found sitting on the ground outside his cottage, quietly tearing to bits stray pieces of paper scattered around him. Meditation, the only way. The, the other saint, whose name was Pirchi, was comparatively a younger man than Mirsaji. He would speak and reply to questions put to him. Mahadev asked Pirchi whether happiness could be found in the samsaric life in which he was placed. At this question, Pirji seemed to have roused himself a little. His voice was firm and decisive. Well, brother, as I have told you several times, there is only one remedy, and that is give up. Give up the miserable life of the world and going up to a solitary place. Meditate upon God, who alone can give you to the happiness you are after. This is the only way and no other. O Ram, thou hast brought thy slave in touch with these saints in order to confirm his faith in thee. The first saint teaches the state of one who reached thee. The second teaches how to reach thee. The kind Mahadev was taking him in the night through various bhajan parties in the city. When Ramadass told him one day that it seemed to be Ram's wish that he should make a move, he was quite unwilling to part from Ramadass. To avoid an immediate contingency of a departure, he escorted him to a village called Urcha, which was about 6 miles from the city. The place is famous for the temple of Sri Ramachandra. Leaving him at this place, and after arranging for his food with a mother living near the temple, Mahadev Prasad returned to the city. His parting words were, "You may remain here as long as you like, or as long as Ram wishes you to remain. When he decides you to leave the place, kindly come back to me at Jhansi." When left alone in contemplation of the divine guide, protector and mother Ram, Ramdas wandered on the bank of the beautiful river of the place. On walking for about 2 miles, he came upon a number of samadhis or tombs, some very old and dilapidated, over which were erected tall conical turrets that shot high up into the air. He understood, on inquiry in the village later, that they were the graves of women who performed sati, a custom prevailing in olden days. This place is now used as a cremation ground. The site is full of trees and a beautiful calm reigns over the place. He decided, as prompted by Ram, to occupy one of the tombs for a retreat for 8 days. He remained at this place only for about an hour. At midday, he would go to the temple and receive the rations prepared by the old mother, which consisted of a few saltless rotis and boiled potatoes. The whole night he would sit up for Ram Bachan in the tomb. Nights were spent in ecstasy. Ram's presence was felt in the very air he was breathing. In the mornings, when he was repeating aloud the charming mantram, Om Sri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. The birds of the air, small and big, and squirrels would alight on the parapet wall and would listen eagerly and with rapt attention to the sound of the great pranava Om. In the evening, the same sound Om would work like magic upon the goats and bullocks that came near the town for grazing. They would raise their heads, pricking up their ears, stand still and drink in the sound. O Ram, it is proved beyond and any doubt that thou resided in the hearts of all creatures. The sleeping souls of the birds of the air and the beasts of the plains are awakened at the call of Ram's glorious voice. Ram, the friend of the poor. During his visits the villagers tried to dissuade Ramdas from staying in the jungle at nights as they warned him of tigers and other wild animals. Because the place occupied by him formed part of a dense and extensive forest. But when the all powerful Ram was there to save him, where was fear for him and from whom? Ram is pervading everywhere, in all things, in all beings, in all creatures. He continued there for 8 days. When he received the command from Ram to move on, a small incident which took place here has to be chronicled at this stage. One day, when he was passing the small bazaar of this place with his lota in hand, he felt thirsty. He now approached as he walked on. A number of small low huts on the one side of the road. Going up to one of them, at its entrance, he found an old mother sitting. He begged of her to give him some water in his lota. The old mother shook her head and said, Maharaj, you cannot take water at my hands. May Ramdas know the reason for this objection? Inquired Ramdas. The simple reason is, put in the mother, I belong to a very low caste. To be brief, I am a barber woman. What of that? Said Ramdas, not the least surprised. You are Ramdas. Mother, all the same, kindly satisfy the thirst of your son. She was gaily pleased at this reply, and going in brought out a seat from him and her water vessel, out of which she poured some water into his lota. He quenched his thirst, occupying the seat so kindly offered by her. Now the old mother said that she was utterly miserable, left alone in the world. She spent all her days and nights in pain, fear, and anxiety. Ramdas then assured her, O mother, there is no cause for fear and anxiety or for a feeling of loneliness when there is Ram to protect us all. Ram is always near us. But a poor, weak-minded woman like myself does not possess any faith in Ram, because I am a sinner. So, saying, the mother burst into tears. You shall have faith, kind mother, by the grace of Ram. Don't despair. Ram is always the friend of the poor and the humble, said Ramdas. Then show me the way, asked the old mother. Repeat the one name Ram at all times of the day and at nights when you are awake. You may be sure that you will not feel lonely or miserable as long as you are uttering that glorious name. Where this name is sounded or meditated upon, there resides no sorrow, no anxiety, name, not even death. Saying this, Ramdas started to go. When she begged him to visit her again the next day, as decided by her, he went to her hut again the following day at about the same time. Well, mother, how do you do? Was his question. There was a cheerful smile on the face of the mother. She said that she had acted upon his advice and was finding herself much relieved from fear and cares. Then she offered him some laddus, which she said she had got from the sweetmeat shop. Mother, this is not what Ramdas wants. He wants something prepared by your own hands, said he. At this, she went in and got for him a piece of roti or bread made by her, which he ate with no small amount of pleasure. Later, he saw her once again when she was busy uttering Ram Ram. God never punishes. By Ram command, Ramdas came back to Jhansi, where Mahadev Prasad welcomed him most heartily and pressed him to spend a few more days with him. At this time, Ram brought him into contact with more than a dozen friends at Jhansi, who were all very kind and hospitable to him. Of these, one young friend named Ram Kinger was extremely kind. One day, in the course of a conversation, he heard that on the Himalayas there were two shrines, Kedarnath and Badrinath, and the path leading to these places was very difficult, and also the cold there was very intense. O Ram, it was all your suggestion. For him, there was always a fascination for dangerous journeys and perilous places. Kedarnath he had read of in the splendid writings of that great Mahatma Swamy Ramatirtha. His mind was made up. Ram prompted and the resolution was sealed that he should visit these shrines. However difficult the path that led to them, he expressed Ram's wish to his friends Mahadev and others, who valued his frail body so dearly, did not at first appreciate the idea. They said that the journey was a terrible one and it would prove so, especially to Ramdas, whose body was so weak and emaciated. He replied, Ram has given his fiat and Ramdas obeys, placing full trust in him. The burden is on Ram to see that he is taken care of. Even if his body were to drop off at the will of Ram, he would not grumble. He will then be Ram's entirely. Go, he must. At once Ram Kinkar, the young friend, proposed to follow on his journey to Kedarnath and Badrinath. So he had remained at Jhansi for some days more at the request of these friends, which gave Ram Kinkar sufficient time to make his preparations for the journey. Some other incidents in connection with his stay at Jhansi have to be narrated here before he describes his pilgrimage to the Himalayas. After the resolution was made, he was taken over by Ramkinkar, who kept him in a Ram Mandir near his own house and carefully looked after his personal wants. In this mandir, there was a pujari known as Pandaji. O Pandaji, how very kind you were too. At midday, every day, Ramdas would saunter out in the hot sun and walk in the street of Jhansi for 2 or 3 hours. The heat of the sun at midday in that season was very severe, but he would not mind it. Observing this one day, Pandaji, who was treating him as a child, warned him thus: "Look here, Maharaj, you are every day going out at midday and wandering about in the hot sun. Your head, which is clean shaven, is always uncovered. If you are obstinate, I shall have to lock you up in the temple before I go out." With this threat, an indication of his great love for Ramdas, he would press him to sleep in the afternoon and would not leave the mandir for midday meals until he saw Ramdas asleep. "O Ram, how kind thou art!" One day, during his midday walks, Ramdas got thirsty and he discovered on the way a well at which some others were drawing water. He went up to the place and requested one of them to give him some water to quench his thirst. In reply, the mother, who was asked for water, said, "Maharaj, I am a Mohammedan, and you being a Hindu monk, it is not proper that you should accept water at my hands." "O mother," replied he, "Ramdas no caste distinctions. He finds in you that universal mother, Sita, as he finds in all women. Therefore, do not hesitate to provide your son with some water." The mother was strangely surprised at this reply, washed the water pot thoroughly, and drawing water afresh, poured it out in the hollow of his hands, and he drank as much water as he wanted. Then he continued his work. For about 10 days, he was staying in the Ram Mandir, and during evenings a number of friends of the city would come and put him various questions about Ram, and he would try to satisfy them by such replies as were prompted him by Ram himself. On one occasion, a certain friend came up specially to have a discussion with him on a religious point. His first question was, "Who are you?" "I am Ramdas," was his simple reply. "No, you speak a lie there," retorted the friend. "You are Ram himself. When you declare you are Ramdas, you do not know what you say. God is everywhere and in everything. He is in you and so you are Him. Confess it right away." "True, dear friend, God is everywhere," replied Ramdas. "But at the same time, it must be noted that God is one. And when He is in you and everywhere around you, may I humbly ask to whom you are putting this question?" After reflecting for a time, the friend was driven to say, "Well, I have put the question to myself." This reply was given as a desperate attempt to reconcile his first contention. If he would say that the question was put to Ramdas, there was a clear sense of duality accepted by the disputant himself, I and you. As a matter of fact, put in Ramdas, Ram does not speak. The moment he speaks, he is not Ram. Speech creates always a sense of duality. The speaker and the man spoken to. Ram is one and indivisible. It is sheer ignorance for a man whose ego is a great obstruction for his complete realization of the oneness of God. To say that he is God. The friend persisted for some time more to uphold his argument and eventually gave it up. At the desire of Ramdas, who liked to stay for some days in a retired place, the friend said Jansi took him to a garden about a mile away from the city, where there was a small shed. Here he lived for some days, visited every evening by a number of friends. Here again a schoolmaster came for a discussion. He belonged to the Aryas Samaj, started by that great saint Swamy Dayananda Saraswati. This friend, in the course of a talk, became very hot and excited. The point was about the Suddhi movement set on foot by Swami Shraddhananji. Ramdas was clearly opposed to this movement, as he is in fact opposed to every effort on the part of anybody to create differences in religious faiths. That all faiths led to the same goal is a most beautiful and convincing truth. At the close of the discussion, the friend exceeded the limits of decent work. However, Ramdas was cool and collected by the grace of Ram. At parting, he assured the friend that he loved him most dearly in spite of any objectionable words used by him. Next day, about the same time, this friend came again in a great hurry. He could scarcely talk. He could only whisper. His throat was choked up. His condition was pitiable. O Maharaj, he exclaimed, falling at the feet of Ramdas, God has punished your slave for having used rough words to you yesterday. See how my throat is choked and I cannot speak out properly. O friend, Ramdas is really sorry to hear this. But be assured of this, God never punishes. God is love and is always kind. Our own doubts are our enemies and create a lot of mischief. The so-called evil is of our own making. At once, pulling out Ramdas' right hand, the friend rubbed the palm on his throat and, strange to say, his throat cleared and he began to talk more clearly, and in a few minutes he was all right. Behold, Maharaj, how powerful you are, he cried exultantly. You make a mistake. Dear friend, replied Ramdas, Ramdas is a poor slave of Ram, possessing no powers at all. Your faith alone has cured you and nothing else. From this time onwards, the friend became very much attached to him and was very kind. O Ram, thy ways are so wonderful that Ramdas gets utterly bewildered at times. The friends at Jhansi, whom he met daily in that city, were all very charitable in disposition. Especially were they kind and hospitable to sadhus. When he was living with Mahadev Prasad, He found this Friendian pattern of charity and humility. Mahadev would never send away a hungry man from his door without feeding him. He would forego his own meal to satisfy a hungry man. His heart was so soft and so tender. Mahadev's humility was exemplary. Ram certainly gave Ramdas the society of these friends so that he might know what true charity and humility meant in actual practice. Ram Kinkar, the young friend who accompanied him on his pilgrimage to the Himalayas, made it a rule to utilize about 10% of his salary for charity. This is really a beautiful hint for all. While speaking of charity, the ideal of charity followed by the householder of northern India is indeed very noble and lofty. The ideal of the ancients is that the householder has no right to exit as such if he does not share his food every day with a hungry man of no means, such as a beggar or a sadhu. In fact, it is declared that a man assumes grihastha sarma with the specific object of carrying out this noble ideal. There are found some grihasthas who would not wait for a guest to turn up but would go seeking for one in the streets, in temple or dharmashalas, suching the piety of the householders. Ramdas' experience in southern India was also full of incidents in which charity played a most laudable part. In fact, the whole of India is a great land of charity. Himalayan Journey 1. The friends in Jhansi provided Ramdas with all the necessaries for the journey to the Himalayas, and the day for departure came. Many came as far as the railway station to bid farewell to humble Ramdas and Ram Kinkar. Both parties parted after mutual exchange of good wishes. In due time, Hardware was reached. Hardware, as the name suggests, is the gateway to the great shrines of the Himalayas. Here the pilgrims stayed for 2 days. It is most delightful to visit the bank of the Ganga, where congregate sannyasinis, sadhus, bhaktas, brahmins, pious mothers, all busy with baths, ablutions, Sandhya prayers, and worship. O Ram, thou art clearly manifest at this holy place. Now the journey on the Himalayas commenced, up and up. Ramdas and Ram Kinkar mounted and reached the place called Rishikesh. Rishikesh is a very beautiful place. The scenes on the banks of the holy Ganga are simply charming. Here the lofty peaks of mountains are dimly visible at a distance, covered over with white mist, kissing as they do the rolling waves of clouds that hang above them. A nearer haze presents to the eye high gigantic rocks with the dense forest, a mixture of green, yellow, and red hues of leaves, foliage, and blossoms. A still nearer view shows the crystal water of the holy Ganga that flows in all calmness and majesty, disclosing in her bosom huge pieces of rocks which her rushing torrent had pulled down in days of yore. and made round and smooth, O Ram, thou art sublime. On one side of the great river are seen a number of small thatched huts, neat and clean, ashrams of sannyasis. Ram Kinkar took Ramdas into one of these huts. The interior of the hut was fitted with the simplest furniture. A bamboo cot, two posts of which formed the pillars of the hut itself, on which was spread a deer skin and a kambal or blankets lying in folds at the foot of each. A venerable old sannyasi was squatting upon the deerskin. On a peg was hanging his kamantal made of a black shell, except a small piece of cloth and a spare coffin which were drying in the sun outside. He had no other clothing. On the sandy floor of the hut was a bamboo mat, and in a corner were two black stones, one big and the other small, crushing almonds and such other hard eatables having shells to break. There was a calm and peaceful look upon the countenance of the saint. He welcomed Ram Kinkar and Ramdas with a cheerful smile, and they seated themselves on the mat after prostrating at the feet of the Mahatma. He offered some cardamons to this guest and had a simple and childlike talk with them about saints who would be found in the thick forest on the opposite bank of the Ganges, unexplored by ordinary man, where for a number of years that might be performing tapasya. His beautiful advice to Ramdas was to remain as long as possible for his sadhana in solitude, than which there is no better means for control of the mind. He was kind, affable, engaging, and good. O Ram, it was thyself in all thy glory that Ramdas met under that simple roof. One thing more, this saint was very fond of birds. He would not miss to share his food with them every day. They would wait for their share on the trees outside the hut. He talked very lovingly of them. After coming out, Ram Kinkar and Ramdas wandered on the bank of Mother Ganga, where they saw a number of sannyasis clad in orange robes, their faces beaming with a cheerful light. They had all came out for their usual morning bath in the holy waters. Ramdas, during his stay in Rishikesh, had occupied the mud platform around a banyan tree on the bank of the river close to the hut of a Mahatma. This saint was also very kind to Ramdas. His hobby was to feed cows and monkeys, who would always be crowding round his hut. In order to feed them, he would be begging in the bazaar and secure foodstuffs and grass. He was finding a peculiar pleasure in childishly dancing with monkeys, running after them, making strange noises, all in glee and sport. His face was bright, and his greenish eyes would twinkle always with a watery tenderness. Under the same tree there was also a blind sadhu who had a good voice, which he made right use of by singing the glory of Ram. 3 days were spent here in all peace and happiness. Ram Kinkar was kind enough to attend to Ramdas' food. There are two big anakshatras in Rishikesh which daily furnish food to all the sannyasis. of the Kshetras. One was started by a great Mahatma by name Kalihambila Baba, who is now in Mahasamadhi. On these mountains and among sadhus, his blessed name is one on the lips of all. With his influence, he has induced the wealthy merchants of Bombay and other places to open at every 10 to 15 miles on the hills a dharmashala in which sadavat or foodstuffs are distributed free to all sadhu pilgrims who hold chicks with which they are provided at Rishikesh. Ram Kinkar secured these chicks for Ramadass at Rishikesh. Thank you.